It happens to music lovers all the time. At a certain point, you get stuck in a loop. And inside that loop is maybe 2, 3, 4 groups you like listening to. Or maybe it's a particular genre of music you like listening to. So you stay in your loop. But outside that loop, something really good passed you by, and you never even heard it, because you were in your loop. On this episode, we're going to pull out some of those albums you might have missed, but you probably would have liked. Now maybe you will like them, maybe you won't. Maybe you're glad they passed you by. Listen in and find out.
The KOFB studio presents Milk Crates and Turntables, a music discussion podcast hosted by Scott McLean with his co-host Jack Calabrese. Now, let's talk music. Enjoy the show.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Amanda, as usual. Welcome to Milk Crates and Turntables, but I suppose you already know that because you tuned in. This week's episode is going to be, they're always interesting. They're always interesting. So before I even discuss what we're going to be doing, I want to let you know that I'm going to bring on my co-host, Jack Calabrese. But before I do that, I want to let everyone know that this podcast is as raw as it gets. It is organic, to say the least. Jack and I, we have a music discussion every week. We have a specific topic that we talk about. But the thing is, I don't know what Jack has and Jack doesn't know what I have. We don't produce this. We don't say, okay, what do you got for me? Okay, we're going to transition into this. What you hear is a raw conversation between two friends that have been around each other for the last 40, 45 years. But so this is a unique podcast, to say the least. If you've listened to other podcasts, they're usually very well produced. This is well produced, I'm not saying, but it's organic. So without further ado, let me bring on my co-host and partner in crime and music whiz and concert aficionado, Mr. Jack Calabrese.
Good evening, Mr. McLean. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, buddy. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
What's that?
I said, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yes, I can. So this episode is albums you might have missed along the way. And like I said in the intro, it's those albums, everybody gets stuck in that music loop. Nobody can listen to everything. So we get stuck in these loops, these particular loops, whether it's a genre of music, a decade of music, or you get 3 or 4 groups you just like listening to. And while you're doing that, something went behind you that you probably would have liked. So this episode, you and me are going to bring out what we think people missed. Now, some people might look at us and go, that's crap. I'm glad I missed it. So, we're just going to do it. As usual, we're just going to, do you have anything? You got anything?
Well,
I don't mean to bulldoze
before we
through
get
this.
started, I think it's an interesting thing in terms of, this kind of whole category, because, what are the things that, you may have missed, or, what are underrated albums? And it may be a really popular album, but, people may have just listened to the hit that was played on the radio and never took the time to listen to the whole thing. Maybe it was an album that was regarded as underrated because the one that became before it was just such a monster record that, people didn't really pay attention to the next one. Maybe it was, oversaturated or whatnot. I also think that there's a little bit of it that is a byproduct of kind of the corporate aspect in music, in terms of a lot of what you hear on the radio, what you see on TV is what's fed to us. I think sometimes you have to go out of the box, and sometimes you have to go and find something, or maybe pay a little bit more attention to the bands that you think you like, or be open to things that you may not have heard about, and get away from the stuff that is kind of just running through FM radio, Sirius TV, MTV. I don't know. Does MTV play music anymore? I don't even know that.
I didn't even know MTV still existed. So we can go from there. So yeah, so let's jump into it. You also have to seek some of this stuff out too. Some of these you have to really be into music and say what's new. You have to go out of your comfort zone, like you said, and go look for what's new. Look around. YouTube is a great way to find music. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. You can go down rabbit holes in there. And that's what I like to do. Now, the thing about this episode is Jack and I might break out some vinyl records for the viewers, for the listeners of the podcast. We'll try to describe them, or we'll just say I'm holding up the album. But this is something that people, you don't have to be a vinyl junkie like Jack and I. You can go download this stuff. You can go stream it on one of these platforms, and if you don't like it, pass it on. If you do like it, then you can download it. So this isn't exactly for vinyl or anything like that. Go buy the cassette if you like it.
Well, this is really one of the benefits of our day and age and technology right now. Remember back in the day that you would jump on the train and go to Strawberries or Tower Records or whatever the record store was in your local town, and you purchased an album by a band that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know, you were spending hard-earned cash, and you would actually bring it home, and maybe it was a great album, maybe it wasn't. Now you actually have the opportunity to test drive these things through Spotify, YouTube, Apple. There's so many different platforms out there that you can listen to music and find new things and kind of test the waters before you actually make the investment. That's certainly what I do, especially with what albums cost these days. Records, do you remember complaining that a record was, $7 or $8? Now they're $25 or $30, for the newer releases. And that's where I agree with you in terms of trying to find the original pressings and the original releases where, sometimes you can find them pretty cheap. But,
yeah,
again, you have the ability to test the waters before you make that investment, which is kind of a cool thing.
Right. So let me jump off on this. I'm going to pull out, it's actually an album for the listeners of the podcast. This came out in 2018. Let me see, I put it up to the camera. Echo and the Bunnymen, The Stars, the Ocean, and the Moon. This was their kind of take on, they wanted to, the concept was originally to do all their songs, or a lot of, it's not their greatest hits, but it is in a sense, with an orchestra. But it took on a life of its own, and it kind of went in different directions. It has all their hits on it, but they're kind of redone, and you can hear the difference in the voice, in his voice. It's more mature, it's more raspy than it was when he was younger, which goes for a lot of these guys. But this has and Echo fans will either love it or they'll hate it, one way or another. But the version of Killing Moon on this is phenomenal. It's a great version of that song, and that's a hard song to top in its own right. So if you're interested in something, it's a 2-record set. That's the vinyl. If you want to go download it, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Stars, the Ocean, the Oceans, and the Moon. But it's very different. It's a very different album.
Well, a different album, probably a different take. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm excited to hear it now that you actually brought it up. But, a record that maybe people haven't heard, right. I can't get any closer than this.
Okay.
A record that probably people haven't heard, but a dreadfully underrated band.
Oh, Echo and the Bunnymen. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely underrated. Should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before the Go-Go's.
Oh, please. Speaking of which, I have to tell you, one of the fun things about doing the show is, I never mind our discussion, but, talking about records that you may have missed. I kid you not, I was out doing yard work over the weekend, and I, on Spotify, pulled down the Go-Go's release Beauty and the Beat, their first record, and probably the first time in my entire life that I listened to that record from start to finish, actively listening. And you know what? That is a great record. It's got the hits on it, but, it's punky, it's edgy, it's poppy. There's great harmonies on it. The songs are really great from start to finish. That's a fantastic record. And I will bet you the album of your choice, single album, no box sets or anything like that they will absolutely get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I'm not surprised if they do, and I'll reserve all those comments to keep particular part of the audience intact. I won't. I won't go down that road. But if they do, they do. But I still think Echo and the Bunnymen should probably go in before them. But here we go, the ongoing Go-Go's battle.
Should the Lovin' Spoonful have gone in before Echo and the Bunnymen or the Go-Go's?
No.
Should Joan Jett have gone in before Echo and the Bunnymen or the Go-Go's?
Joan Jett was a trendsetter. She was a trailblazer.
She was a trailblazer, but didn't have the success that the Go-Go's did.
So in your by your rationale, it takes success is the key to getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
No, I think success is one component of it. But
we've compared all the things between the Runaways and the Go-Go's, and your final, stat was, well, they had a number one hit and the Runaways didn't.
No, what I said was the Go-Go's were the first all-female band that played all of their own instruments and wrote all of their own songs that topped the Billboard 200, and nobody has done it since. So you're talking about
MTV is dead.
What's that?
Because MTV died. That's why.
No, MTV was in its heyday back in that.
And that's why they got where they got. But
please. This is an all-girl band that fought their way in an all-male dominated industry.
I know.
That were spit at and ridiculed and booed off stage and worked at their craft.
So were the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, but you're comparing apples and oranges.
I know. Oh, and for the record, I have a great friend of mine who agrees with you on the Go-Go's. He's a Go-Go's kind of a guy, to the point where he still has the Belinda Carlisle Playboy edition.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
the
Go-Go's didn't last that long. She had to resort to getting in the magazine.
Well, it wasn't that bad to look at. Okay, what album do you got?
So the first album that I want to talk about is a Queen album. So, Queen were hugely popular in the 70s. Particularly in the mid 70s. Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, The Game, Jazz, those albums were all, regarded as classics. And then they kind of veered off a little bit. They kind of went away from their classic sound and they got into more of a dance-oriented, almost disco. They were accused of, kind of turning disco, probably or definitely influenced by Freddie Mercury. And as a result, they kind of alienated their audience. But in, the late 80s, they actually returned to form with a record called The Miracle. And The Miracle was a bit of a homecoming for them. A couple of things have changed. So if you go back to the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, they have that scene where, Freddie goes off and he does the solo things, and they have this contentious meeting where Freddie basically begs to get back in the band, which never really happened. But one of the things that did happen was there were a lot of arguments and fights in Queen about songwriting credits. Who was getting credit? Who was making the most money? Whose songs were getting on the records and whatnot? In this album, The Miracle is the first Queen album where all of the members were credited equally. But the thing that was really interesting and the thing that I love about this record was it was a return to form. What I mean by that is they actually went back to their roots and they played some hard driving rock and roll. You know, some of the stuff was campy, some of it was fun and whatnot. Even the album cover is this weird kind of picture of all of their heads kind of joined together, kind of showing that they were a unit, that, you know, those barriers that they had in terms of like the songwriting credits were all gone. But, you know, some of the records, some of the songs that were on there, the song The Miracle, you know, really kind of fun and lighthearted, great harmonies. I Want It All, great rocker, great guitar work. You know, there's just a lot of great songs on that record. And you know what? I don't think anybody has ever really heard that record. But I'll tell you, in terms of love Queen, have always loved them, this is a record that you can listen to from start to finish without interruption, and I think you'll enjoy every track that's on it.
I'll give it a listen. I actually have never heard that album before.
It is a great record, and like I said, you know, one of the reasons why you didn't hear it was it didn't get a lot of play, and one of the reasons it didn't get a lot of play is the album that they did before that, the Works album. They had a video and a song called I Want to Break Free, where they did a video where they all dressed in drag.
Yeah, I saw that.
But it was banned by MTV.
Yeah.
And Freddie Mercury, for all intents and purposes, said, I will never play in the United States again. And they never really did. They never toured the U.S. again. And that's one of the reasons why the album never really kind of hit its stride or made its mark in the United States. It was huge everywhere else. It was number one in Germany and Austria and the UK and Australia, and it never even dented the charts in the United States.
Okay. So I am going to counter that with an album that came out in 2010. I came across this girl watching Live at Daryl's House. It's a great show, right? You ever watched it?
Live at Daryl's House? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Sure. I was going to say, I know that's a dumb question for you. Great show, great. But I came across this girl. She goes by the name of, okay, now, this is not a bit. This is how I have to say this. My Boston accent will not allow me to say it properly. So, she goes by the name of Rumer. R-U-M-E-R. Rumor.
But
if I was to say it in my Boston accent, I'd say she goes by the name of Ruma, even spelled R-U-M-E-R. Nobody's going to understand that. Nobody.
Ruma's playing in the Commons, you know, there in the park.
Did you hear that Ruma album? What, by Fleetwood Mac? No, the girl Ruma. So this girl is sensational. She is a cross. She's the second coming of Karen Carpenter. But she has the swag and the coolness of Dusty Springfield in her lyrics, in her music. She has it's a throwback sound. Any one of the songs on this album, and they're all good, any one of these songs could have been played on AM radio back in 74, 75. But it's modern day, so they're well produced. They come across a lot more, of course, mature than they did back then. But she does a cover of Sarah Smile. It'll blow you away. YouTube it. Her name is Rumer, R-U-M-E-R, not O-R. And that cover of Sarah Smile is spectacular. She did it on live at Daryl's house. And so I became a fan instantly. And she was big over in England, but she never really could cut through over here. And she's still plugging away. She's still making albums. But check out the album Seasons of My Soul by Rumer. You definitely won't be disappointed It's got soul. It's soulful. It's melodic. It's and her voice is again the second coming of Karen Carpenter, which is not a bad thing.
So have you had the opportunity to see her live or?
No, no. Again, she's over in England again, trying to cut her chops over here. It's tough. It's tough. But I never got a chance to see her. Being in South Florida, you don't get a lot of those kind of obscure bands that come down here. It's one of those mainstays for for bigger acts. It's not really like going to Boston or New York or Chicago or Detroit, into these cities where you can grind it out and make it. And if you have a show, people are going to go to it.
Well, that's it. What one of the interesting things about that is that probably much bigger over in Europe, in England, and maybe not so much here. Which was the case with Queen. I mean, Queen was popular in the 70s and they got hugely popular, but it was a long time after Freddie Mercury's death when, the US kind of caught up. But, it doesn't surprise me that, the UK is a lot more open in terms of what they'll listen to and what the radio plays than the United States.
Right.
The case, and I'll actually go into, one of the records that, Deb and I love. As a matter of fact, my whole family love is a band called Elbow. So, back in the day when I was, traveling internationally, one of the things that I would do when I would go to the London offices, I would actually ask, some of the folks that work there, who are you guys listening to? Who are the new bands? Who are you guys into? And they told me, years ago, oh, you got to check this band out called Elbow, which sounded like the weirdest name in the world, to me. But I went and I bought the CD at the time, sight unseen, never heard of them, but, gave it a try and was just absolutely blown away. So Elbow, the Seldom Seen Kid, great record. Again, one of those that you can play from start to finish. Fantastic voice, fantastic musicians. One of the reasons why they've never hit it big in the United States, they're a bunch of pub hanging, beer drinking, quasi ugly guys that don't present well on, MTV or The Voice or, anything on television. In Europe, in the UK, they were playing to 50, 100,000 people. When they came here, we saw them at the Paradise.
Yeah.
They've never been able to, kind of hit their mark. But this is a band that you absolutely should check out. Not really a heavy band, definitely more melodic, but great record. Great records, actually. Build a Rocket Boy, Seldom Seen Kid, both fantastic records, and they have a lot more. Their catalog is incredible.
Was that your pick?
That was my pick. I wasn't intending to pick that, but I just picked that.
You caught me. That was a good transition. Yeah. I thought you were just adding on, but it worked in great. Okay. So one of our viewers on the live stream, John Watkins, agrees with me. John Watkins is another music guy. He not only has the knowledge. Well, Jack, you play the guitar. You have some skills. John Watkins is actually a music guy who's, I'd say he's an expert piano player.
John,
whatever that means. I wouldn't know how to hit a key. But if John Watkins gives me the thumbs up on my pick, that made my night.
John Watkins is a professional musician, as is his wife, Lori. This is, talk about, talented couple that have been able to, earn a living doing exactly what they love, so, him giving you the thumbs up, I'll give a thumbs up to that as well. I'll reinforce that one.
There you go. Johnny Boy getting a big push on this show tonight.
Now, he better not come back and say that he hates the Go-Go's.
Well, and one of our viewers, Randy, she also just messaged in that I was spot on. If you listen to Ruma doing Sarah Smile, it's a great cover, and I can't believe I missed that on our earlier episode of cover songs.
Well, we'll do another one on cover songs. But let me ask you
We're
this:
gonna do 2 or 3 on each one of these episodes. We don't even, for the people listening, the people watching, Jack and I, we don't even scratch the surface of what we have, ready to go for these shows, and it's most of it's off the top of our head. It's stories, but we take notes. We don't want to be that unprofessional. So
has Rumor done Sarah Smile on an album?
yes,
if she hasn't,
it's on one of her albums. It's on one of her albums. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So this is an album I've been touting for years, and you've heard me mention it numerous times, and I can't push it enough. It's Nico Case. This came out in 2002. It's Nico Case, and for the viewers, for the listeners, I'm holding up the vinyl. Blacklisted. Nico Case is an interesting sound. Her sound is it's country soul with an old South feel to it. It's melancholy. Her voice is another one. I gravitate toward female singers. I think I've told you that. I really enjoy female singers more than male singers.
Why?
I think there's more variety in their voices. I think there's more variety in the types of music that they sing. I don't know. I could be off, but I gravitate toward them.
Maybe our next episode should be on women in rock or women in music or
women in music. It would be yeah. So this particular album, she does a great rendition of Aretha Franklin's "Running Out of Fools." Another great. It's a cover, and this album is what I consider a perfect album. And a perfect album to me, everybody has their different ideas on it. A perfect album to me is an album where you can listen to it from start to finish, and every song is good. Every song is good. There's not one throwaway. As we know on albums, CDs, whatever you downloads, if you get 3-4 good songs off an album, that's a good album. This album, every song is good. So Nico Case, her sound, like listening to this album, any song could be in a David Lynch movie. Let's put it that way. It just has that real kind of sound, really not creepy, but deep, a little dark. It can feel, some of them can be a little dark. She's like alt country, I guess you'd call her. Alt country. So Nico Case, Blacklisted. What do you got, buddy?
So you talk about perfect albums, and perfect albums can mean a lot of things in terms of great songs, great writing, great melodies and whatnot. Sometimes it's actually more than that. It's place and time, what's going on in your life. The record that I think that a lot of people have missed, popular band, but I think this is one that a lot of people miss, is Jane's Addiction. Nothing shocking.
Oh, you kidding me? Any album that starts off with the first track, Drop the Needle, and the first thing you hear is running down the mountain.
It's not the first track, but I like that.
What's that?
I said that's not the first track, but that's
all right.
Cool.
Yeah. That's it's okay.
So here's the thing about this, this record.
What is the first track?
The first track is called "Up the Beach." So Mountain Song doesn't actually come on until side 2. It's the second song on the second side. But great.
Those were my drinking days. So forget.
Great record. So here's the story of this this record. First and foremost, when Deb and I first got together, this was in heavy rotation. And actually, the people that kind of introduced me to Deb, it was in heavy rotation with all of us. But one of the things that I think that's really kind of interesting about this record is that, if you think about the mid to late 80s, there's a lot of finger pointing at hair bands. And a lot of those hair bands actually blame grunge for killing their careers, rightly so. Although it wasn't really grunge that killed their careers, it was their shitty songs and the formula and the corporate aspect that kind of took over heavy metal. But there's kind of a link, at least for me, between those hair bands and grunge. And I think that they're both most represented by two bands. Number one, Guns N' Roses, who I don't regard as a hair band. I think that they were a lot grittier, a lot edgier, a lot more from the street, less produced, less about, hairspray and
With a
makeup.
punk
And that
feel
type of
to them too. With a punk feel to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jane's Addiction. So, Jane's Addiction was really kind of the brainchild of Perry Farrell. And they actually put together a demo. They had about 18 songs put together, and the guy that actually produced it was a guy by the name of Dave Jordan. He jumped at the opportunity to actually produce this record because he had actually heard this band, or at least heard the demos. And he actually took the 18 songs that were on that demo, and he took the best 9 out of them. And when he got the band together, he actually had them rehearse those 9 songs in order, the order that he actually picked. And that's how they actually ended up on the record. But, the record starts up with Up the Beach. It goes in Oceanside, Had a Dad, Ted Just Admitted with a little snippet from Ted Bundy, Standing in the Shower Thinking with Flea. No, I'm sorry. That's not the right song. Standing in the Shower Thinking. Then it goes into Summertime Rules, Mountain Song, Idiot's Rule. Idiot's Rule was the song that I was thinking of that actually has a horn section, and the trumpet is actually played by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Jane says, "Thank you, boys." And then some of the albums actually had a last song called Pigs and Zen. When it first came out, it was really just on the cassette. It wasn't on the original release. But this is a great record, monster album, one of the most perfect records, not a bad song on it, a lot of variety, a lot of really interesting things, and it was new, it was fresh, it was different when it first came out, and it was in heavy, heavy, heavy rotation when it first came out for like a year, and we still play it a lot. So I love this record.
Right. And again, those were my drinking days. That was around the tail end of my drinking days, and that was a staple in my CD box. So yeah. I'm gonna go. My pick for an overlooked album, and I get dogged for this sometimes, and I don't care because I like them. But in 1990, the Pet Shop Boys came out with Behavior. Okay. Behavior, it was their 4th album, and it was very different from their other albums. They wanted to go into the studio, and they wanted to do analog synth, not digital synth. They wanted to go with a deeper sound. This album was inspired by Depeche Mode's Violator, actually. And for the people that won't listen to it because they're the Pet Shop Boys, you have no idea what you're missing. Pet Shop Boys' Behavior is a great album. Another perfect album. Every song from start to finish. Grow up and listen to the Pet Shop Boys. That's an order. And if you're gonna listen to them, listen to this album. Because it is a really, really good album, and you're cutting yourself short, selling yourself short if you like music, and it is in that style, that synth pop style. But Neil Tennant has a fantastic voice, is consistent as they can be. His voice has not changed as he got older, as do most lead singers. And so, with that, I would say go out and get Behavior. And again, an overlooked album in the States because it was the Pet Shop Boys, But again, grow up, grow the fuck up, and listen to a good album. Okay, I'm off my soapbox with the Pet Shop Boys. And why aren't they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? They should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before the Go-Go's. The number 2 selling duo in the world, in music history, these two guys behind Hall & Oates, and they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But the Go-Go's will go in.
No, I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's a sign right on the front door that says "No pets allowed."
There it is. The weekly.
It'll be interesting to see if a band like the Pet Shop Boys actually make it into the Rock and Roll Hall.
Well, I think the Depeche Mode broke the ceiling for them now.
Yeah, maybe, but Depeche Mode was a much more popular band than the Pet Shop Boys, at least here in the United States.
In the United States, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they don't belong. I don't know enough about the Pet Shop Boys because I just haven't had the opportunity to really listen to them. And you know what? I'll admit, I haven't really given them a listen because they just didn't touch my ears, and maybe I just haven't spent the time. But I promise you that I will.
Okay.
That I will.
You'll like it. You will like. Behavior is one of my favorite albums.
I'm an easy touch. I like almost anything.
I'll leave the joke on the floor for that one.
Probably belongs there anyway. All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, or maybe I will. But the record that I think that people should go out and listen to is a record that came out in the mid '90s. You guys probably know the singles, but you probably don't know anything beyond that, and that's a band called Fastball. And it's an album called All the Pain Money Can Buy. So this is a band that really kind of worked it out, came out of Austin in the mid-'90s. As a matter of fact, this album, believe it or not, is actually a pretty popular album. It started out relatively slow, and eventually it actually sold over 1 million copies. And most people know the song The Way. Where were they going without ever knowing the way? And there's actually kind of an interesting story to that particular song. So that song was inspired by, there was a news story that was going around in the Austin area that there was an older couple that were heading out to a festival. I don't think it was a music festival or whatnot, but they actually got lost and they couldn't find them. So the lead singer and the principal songwriter, a guy by the name of Tony Scalzo, he actually heard this story because it was a pretty big story in Austin, and he romanticized this couple, this elderly couple that got in their car, didn't tell their family where they were going, and got lost. So he kind of romanticized it, and the lyrics talk about where were they going without ever knowing the way. So it's a great song, great hooks and whatnot. The sad part about it is they found the couple like 2 weeks later, dead. And then they were like 400 miles from home. I mean, just, totally lost, Alzheimer's, whatever the case was. But beyond that song, which is still in heavy rotation on FM radio today, there's a great album behind it. Song for song, great pop, power rock, heavy guitar on it, but not too heavy. It's just a great record from start to finish, and something that I think was largely overlooked by the general public. And then, unfortunately, beyond that, the band is actually still together, but they haven't had the same success that they had with that one record. But definitely something that you should give a listen to. I think you'd be really surprised.
I hate that song.
Why?
I just don't like it. I think it sounds, right off the bat, to me, it sounds campy. It sounds popish. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the style, the rhythm of it. Sorry.
Not enough synthesizer for you?
Not enough synthesizer. It needed some cowbell.
I'm sorry. I actually, I think there's cowbell in that song.
But who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? We don't agree on everything. That's the beauty of this show. We don't agree on everything.
It's a great record.
I'm going to jump to, it's kind of an offshoot from my last pick of the Pet Shop Boys. In 1990, Bernard Sumner, well, actually before 1990, in 89, Bernard Sumner from New Order he wanted to get more into the synth pop. Not synth pop, but he wanted to get more synth into New Order. He wanted to do more songs in that direction. The rest of the band didn't want to do it. They were like, no, we're not doing it. So he goes out on his own, and he tries to make an album, and he doesn't like working alone, finds that out. So he makes a phone call to none other than Johnny fucking Marr, guitarist from the Smiths, right? One of the greatest guitarists ever, right? Did I say Johnny fucking Marr? Okay.
Yeah, he's a pretty good guitar player.
He's pretty good. Yeah, he's okay.
Pretty good.
He has his moments.
I like the stuff that he did with Modest Mouse.
Hey, yeah, exactly. Yeah. They form a group called Electronic. Now, the funny thing is, they released a single called Getting Away With It, which was sung by Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys. He heard these two got together, and he's like, we got to collaborate. That is a fantastic song. Getting Away With It is a great song off that album. There's 3 good songs on that album. The whole album is good. There's a couple of throwaways. But Getting Away With It was released in 89. They didn't put out their first album until, I think it was 91. So they put out a single before they even put out an album, which is interesting, but it caught on. I think it was 8 months before the album was released. They released the single Getting Away With It, and go listen to it on YouTube. If you want to get back to that sound of the early 90s, because the early 90s is an overlooked chunk of time for music. There was a lot of good music in the early 90s. Just never really gets talked about. And this album, Electronic, brings you right back to it. Get the Message is another great song off that album. So
I think I'm getting a better understanding of where you might be coming from. So, you talk about these guys, Electronic, Depeche Mode, the Pet Shop Boys, all heavy synth-oriented bands. Now, let's think about this for a second. You don't like Fastball, guitar-oriented. You don't like Green Day, very guitar-oriented. You don't particularly like the Ramones, very guitar-oriented. You're a synth guy. You're a keyboard man. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it.
I do like that music. I like well-produced music. And synth pop is usually very well-produced music. I think, for me, it's easy to listen to. It's one of my favorite genres of music.
Of course it's easy to produce. It's all electronic. You just plug it into a computer, and it's all nice and clean.
Yeah, but I'll also go listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Who?
I'll listen to Hendrix. I'll listen to Zeppelin. I'll listen to Rage Against the Machine. I mean, and I like Rage Against the Machine. I'm not buried in synth pop. I like synth pop, and these albums, because of that attitude that you just displayed against that anti-synth pop. You're an anti-synth pop. That's what you are. You're an anti-synth pop.
I'm a synthesist.
Yeah, you're an anti-synth pop, and I am going to make a T-shirt saying Jack is an anti-synth pop.
That is absolutely not true.
Here we go. I know. Don't worry. I won't dox you. I won't cancel you. I'll leave you alone. I won't unleash some mask on you.
This is our last episode. Cancel culture.
Because of synth pop. All the synth pop fans are coming after you, Jack.
I'm gonna get pulled into HR tomorrow. Jack, it came to our attention that you're a part of a podcast and you have alienated a certain group of musicians.
You're an anti-synth pop.
That's not the type of company that we are.
Exactly. I will make fun.
It was really nice having you here for a little while, but bye-bye.
Sorry. And take your Go-Go's cassette with you as you go out the door.
I know. Too much guitar, man.
All right, let's get an album. We're getting close to our What Do You Got segment.
So, early '90s. This is the one and only release by this artist, but Jeff Buckley, Grace. And I have to admit something. When I first heard this record, this was not something that I picked. That my wife loved this album and played it to death, and it took me a while to get my arms around it. And you know what? I guess to a certain extent, I was indicative of the general public because Grace was initially panned by the critics, or at least mixed reviews, and sold incredibly, incredibly poorly. It did not do well, but people over time discovered it, and it was huge elsewhere. It actually went platinum 7 times in Australia. But Jeff Buckley, whether you know the story or not, he was budding musician, had this record that he had actually put out. Initially didn't do well. He was getting ready to do his second record. He was down in Memphis, and for whatever reason, he decided to go swimming in a part of the Mississippi River. There's an offshoot called the Wolf, and he actually jumped into the water fully clothed. No drugs in his system, no real alcohol in his system, and he was out swimming. He was actually singing Whole Lot of Love, according to the guy that he was with. And a boat came by that caused these big waves, and he went under, and it took him like 4 or 5 days to find. But this album, Grace, is just an incredible record. Songs like Mojo Pin, Last Goodbye. There is what I think is the ultimate and best version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. A lot of people have done that song. U2 have done that song. Bon Jovi does a horrible version of that song. But Jeff Buckley, just with an electric guitar and a little bit of echo, does just a hauntingly beautiful version of that record. In terms of people discovering it, I think after his death, he got a lot more notoriety. People caught on. People got into the record. His favorite band was Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page calls Grace probably his favorite album of that decade. Rob Plant was also a big fan of it. David Bowie actually calls it the best album ever made. But once again, not a lot of people know this record. They might know Hallelujah, but they certainly don't know Mojo Pin. They don't know Last Goodbye. They don't know So Real. They don't know Lilac Wine, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. So, I think one of the things that you and I should do, Scott, is maybe pick out a couple of songs from each of these records that we're actually talking about to maybe introduce people to them so they can actually go out and listen to it. But this is a great, great record, and actually re-entered the charts in a lot of countries. They reissued and did a deluxe packaging of it in like 2007. It actually re-entered the charts in a lot of different countries. Great, great record. And he never got to make another
Didn't
one.
his father drown also?
His father, I think, died of an overdose.
Was it an overdose?
So Jeff Buckley.
Were they the same age or something? There was some strange.
They were close. They both died really, really young. And as a matter of fact, Jeff Buckley used to talk about how he wasn't going to live a long life, and maybe as a result of what had happened to his dad. And unfortunately, that whole situation happened. I got a friend down in Memphis. His name is Dennis Payton. Great guy. Knows a shit ton about music. And he actually gave me a little tour of Memphis. We went to Sun Studios and the whole MLK down there. But he actually took me to the exact spot where Jeff Buckley walked into the water. And I have to tell you, it was creepy and eerie and haunting. And it was just weird. It was just a weird, dreadful type feeling. But still an amazing, amazing record.
All right. I think we'll check it out. And yeah, you touched on something. We're going to, I'm going to put Jack's going to send me the album or the artist and the song. And we're going to put together, I'm going to put together a playlist after each episode and a Spotify playlist. And I'll send it out on Facebook and I'll put it out over Twitter. And if you want to be on the mailing list, because now we're going to start a mailing list for all these things, milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com. So, hold on one second. Yeah, so it's milkcratesandturntables@gmail.com if you want to be on the mailing list. And we're going to be doing giveaways in the future too. But
Woohoo!
yeah, you got to be
I
on the
didn't
mailing
include that.
list.
I don't have a budget for that.
I guess I will.
Everybody's going to get a Liberty Mutual T-shirt.
Yeah, yeah. I got a couple that I want to get to, but I'm going to go with this one. Since you think I'm synth pop boy, in 2006, the Black Angels came on the scene, and the Black Angels are from Austin, Texas, and they are relentless tourers. They came out of like the mescaline scene. They're throwback. They're psychedelic rock, but they have a harder edge, a lot of reverb in the guitar, which I really love. It's like psychedelic music. You see them in concert, and they got all the crazy, like the old, like Pink Floyd had in the original Pink Floyd had in the background, the blotches and the colors and the so their album Passover is their debut album. And the song off that you want to go listen to is Young Men Dead. One of the greatest opening guitar licks I've ever heard. And that's saying a lot. That's the song that caught me. I heard that and I said, what the fuck is that? And I went and listened to that and I was hooked. The Black Angels, they actually came to Miami, that rare offbeat group. They played in some small club right outside, right on the edge of Liberty City in Miami, which is really not a good place. I'm just saying that. I'm just going to put it out there. It is not a really good place to be at 9, 10 o'clock at night, because that's when the show starts. Driving through there, let's just say I didn't stop at any stop signs or red lights. I know better. So I make my way over to the club, and the tour bus is right outside the front door. That's how this place was. Right? One of those stages that's literally 2 feet off the ground. Right? And there's no seats. There's no seats, everything. It's a bar. It's a bar. And they tore it up, man. And I went alone. I very rarely go to concerts. I think that was the only concert I ever went to by myself. And I had a blast. They were phenomenal. They met all my expectations. This sound is, like I said, it's that psychedelic, like rock, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, Passover by the Black Angels came out in 2006. Great album, start to finish, hard driving. They got the rare female drummer, and they're consistent. They are consistently good. They tour relentlessly. I think they make their money off. That song has actually been in movies, TV shows, commercials. So they're getting a little paycheck from that.
Isn't that the amazing thing? There's so much music out there that people just don't know about.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
So we usually do what do you got at this time? And that's the last segment of the show where Jack pulls up something new, I pull up something new, and we, it's kind of our recommendation of the week. This show has kind of been one big what do you got? Because these are the types of albums that we pull out to introduce to people in our audience. So we can let's just carry it over. What do you got? And then we'll just kind of wrap it up, because this is all one big what do you got?
Well, so I hit the record stores like I usually do this week, and I actually picked up 3 releases. The first one is Thundercat, Flying Lotus. This is something that my daughter Vanessa turned me on to. Kind of dance-oriented, but, it's kind of ethereal and really kind of different, really kind of funky. Still exploring the whole jazz thing. So I picked up Art Blakey, The Roots and Herbs. This is with the Jazz Messengers. This is on Blue Note, the Tone Poet series. Really amazing record. And again, I don't know that much about jazz, but it's something that I'm interested in learning a little bit more about. So I'm buying these records and listening to it. But the last one, and the one that I'm really excited about that I haven't picked up until actually today, is the latest Pearl Jam release, which is called Gigaton. So I can't really talk about this record other than the few tracks on it that I know. For whatever reason, I've been holding off on purchasing it. But one of the things that I think that actually fits into our theme tonight is I know for a fact that, Pearl Jam, absolutely huge band, certainly huge in concert. Most people know their first two records. They might know the third one, and then they might know a handful of songs after. Their catalog is so deep, and they have a ton of records. Gigaton, great record. The Pearl Jam self-titled, which a lot of people call the Avocado, record, is great. No Code, great albums. Those albums are fantastic, and I don't think anybody has really gone out and listened to those. But if you were a Pearl Jam fan back in the day when they first came out, if you explore some of those later releases, I think you're going to find that you like a lot of those records. And you just may not have heard it because they just didn't get the radio play that they had in the past.
Yeah, it's amazing what gets bumped for the crap that gets put on the radio. So I am going pretty deep outside the box on this one. I think you're going to be surprised with this. I love this album. It's Bebel Gilberto. Okay.
Ooh.
Yes. She's the daughter of two famous singers. Her father was like a bossa nova legend. Her mother was a great singer. She's from, I want to say, Colombia or Brazil, but she split time. The parents broke up, and she split time between New York and I believe that's how it went. But this album is a great album. Another one that's and then that's the self-titled album, Bebel Gilberto.
Cool.
It's like a Brazilian jazz. It's like a Brazilian jazz.
So is it like mid-tempo? Is it kind of moody? Is it upbeat? Is it more dance-oriented?
Yeah, it's a nice sound. It has, like I said, that kind of Brazilian jazz, almost not lounge, sort of loungish.
So is it? Would you describe it as a great Sunday morning record, or is it?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about it is, I'm just gonna be blunt. I don't know what the fuck she's saying because it's not in English. Some of it is, but most of it isn't. But it's beautiful, man. It is a beautiful album, beautiful to listen to. Actually, a Brazilian girl at work turned me on to it, and she's just really, really talented and really good. She's been around for a while, so I picked that up this week. Bebel Gilberto. Again, it's like a bossa nova, Brazilian jazz. And I finally got my hands on this album that I'm holding up. Jessica Lee Mayfield with Blasphemy So Heartfelt. This album was fucking hard to find. It cost me $70, right? Which I very rarely will do, but I wanted this album. And it's still sealed. Because I have it downloaded. I'll break it open like your album you just showed. Jessica Lee Mayfield made an album when she was 15 years old with her brother in their house. And she went under the name Chitlin. It was called White Lies, I think. And somehow Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys got his hands on it, said, I want to meet this girl. Met her, said, we're going into the studio. And they came out with this album. Now, this album is the built-up and more produced version of her first album, White Lies. Dan Auerbach got his hands on it and made it a brilliant album. It's he describes her as her style is dark. It's moody, as he said, not unlike Nick Cave from in the Bad Seeds. But she has a very twangy kind of country sound to her voice, and you could hear a little country in there. It's kind of alt country. But if you can download this, I know getting the album is fucking near to impossible. It took me a long time.
Is it out of print? Is that why you can't get it?
Well, it came out in 2008. They weren't making albums. They just weren't. And she wasn't a big star, so they didn't make many of them.
So is she still around?
She's still around. Yeah, she just made an album with, what's his name? Seth Avett from the Black Keys. Right? The Avett Brothers. Is that right?
Avett Brothers.
Avett Brothers. Yeah, I'm not a big Black Keys guy.
Not the Black Keys, the Avett Brothers.
The Avett Brothers. So they're not. They have nothing to do with the Black Keys.
No, I think they may have toured together at one time, but completely separate band. But yeah. By the way, great band. The Avett Brothers are fantastic.
Yes. And I listened to that album, and yeah, very good. And anyways, so those are my two picks: Bebel Gilberto and Jessica Lee Mayfield.
Oh, those are good ones. You're gonna have to send me the links to those so I can check them out.
I certainly will. So,
how many records did you not get to tonight? Because I have a stack next to me that I haven't took.
4.
Yeah. I think I have another 6 that I haven't touched upon, and I
had a couple of. So you could say there was 6. I had a couple on reserve.
Yeah, we'll have to pick this up again another time.
Oh, absolutely. So, Jack, stay on. For the people watching, thank you for viewing. Thank you for tuning in. We're here every Wednesday night. We stream live over YouTube, the Milk Crates and Turntables channel under the KOFB studio, Facebook Live, and Twitch. And for the podcast listeners, thank you for listening. We truly appreciate it. We do this for it's our passion, and we're making it fun. We're bringing it to the people. If you want to listen to us, we're up on every platform. Go to Spotify, download it. It's free. Download Spotify. It's free. Download the podcast. It's free. Give it a listen. Pass it on to your friends. You're on the ground floor of something we think is going to be pretty good. So, unless I'm forgetting something, Jack, stay on. To the viewers, thanks again for tuning in. And this podcast will be released probably Thursday afternoon. So download it. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next Wednesday night to the viewers and the podcast listeners. We will see you or hear you, or you'll hear us next week.